Jose Antonio Vargas of the Washington Post.
Jose Antonio Vargas, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist.
I lived the American dream, building a successful career as a journalist. But I was living a lie.
I'm going to tell you something that I haven't told a lot of people. I'm actually an undocumented immigrant. Immigration is stories, so here's my story. My grandparents legally immigrated from the Philippines in the mid-1980s. My grandfather decided that he was going to get his grandson to come to America.
One morning, my suitcase was packed. I was 12. It's been 18 years since I've seen my mother.
So I'm launching a whole campaign about what it means to be an American, and the fact that I am an American. There are 11 million undocumented people in this country.
2010, undocumented people paid $11.2 billion in state and local taxes.
From Brazil. I'm an undocumented immigrant from Germany.
We mow your lawn, we work at your houses, maybe we're your doctors, maybe we're nurses. We're not what you think we are.
People who have come here illegally should not be citizens of the United States.
So what happens in Iowa if you discover as a cop that somebody's an undocumented person?
A major blow for immigration reform today. The Senate voted against the DREAM Act.
I'm a conservative and I'm a hardcore Republican, but I don't agree with them on this.
You're an illegal alien.
No, I'm an undocumented.
No, you're illegal. I think I've broken a lot of passing in my studio.
Many Americans, I would say, people who came here to do good for this country. We dream of a path to citizenship. We dream of contributing to the country we call our home. I have this fantasy that I get a green card and I fly and get my mother video radio.
Please give a warm USF Bulls welcome to Jose Antonio Vargas.
Hi. Good evening. How are you? I'm really happy to be in Tampa. The last time I was here was 7 years ago. I was covering the Republican primary presidential debate in St. Petersburg that YouTube put together with CNN. Do you remember this? It was like random people on YouTube can ask questions to Mitt Romney and Rudy Giuliani. So that was really fun. Speaking of elections, did you vote?
Yes.
Okay, great. Are we depressed? So I get a lot of hate mail. And I actually look forward to it because I wonder how creative people can get with their hate mail. And I average maybe 30 a day, which is, that's nothing. It's not a big deal. But during the day of the election, the morning of the election on Tuesday, I got this long email that ended with, the last sentence, which is the question, was, "Are you gonna vote, you illegal?" And I think it's really important to engage people, but there are some people that are kind of, you don't want to engage because clearly you're just gonna be whatever it is. But this one, it just hit me kind of in the wrong way and I decided that I was gonna engage. So I drafted a response. And I was gonna say, no, I cannot vote. So people don't understand that to be an undocumented immigrant means to not have documents, right? When you voted, you have to show people an ID, right? We can't vote because we don't have the right ID to show people. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah, when I travel all across this country, reporters themselves ask me this question of, are you gonna vote? And then I started thinking, wait a second, do they have all these like voter rights, protect the ballot box thing because they think not only will black people vote, but people like me will like start voting. Like, is this why? So that's interesting to me. So instead, I said to the gentleman, instead of voting, I can't vote, but I pay taxes. I don't know if people know that undocumented people actually pay billions of dollars in taxes. In 2010, collectively, undocumented people paid about $11.2 billion, as you heard from the trailer of the film, right? Here in the great state of Florida, about 7% of your workforce is undocumented, right? Undocumented Floridians paid about $706 million in state and local taxes in 2010. As you can see, breakdown-wise, that's about $73 million in property taxes, because we own property, and that's about $634 million in sales taxes. When we go to Starbucks to get that pumpkin spice latte, we pay the exact same sales tax. By the way, do you see these figures in the Miami Herald or the Tampa Tribune? I'm just curious. We also pay what's called Social Security. Vice News broke the news in August that undocumented workers, there's about 7 million undocumented workers in this country, according to the Social Security Administration. Why do they know this? Because we use fake Social Security numbers, or fake numbers, but somehow still manage to pay into Social Security. Actually, according to the chief actuary of the Social Security Administration, undocumented workers in this country have paid about $100 billion into the Social Security fund in the past decade. So this news, you can Google this, right? It's on the internet, and it broke in August. Have you seen anybody else quote this? And so I'm actually now a business owner. The dean, you can't hire me, but I can hire you. So undocumented people are allowed to own limited liability corporations and allowed to actually start companies, even though companies can't hire us. So as I've traveled across this country for the past 3.5 years, I've met many undocumented business owners who own construction companies, who own their own landscape design companies, people like me who actually I run a nonprofit, Define American, and I have a media production company where I employ 5 people. Isn't that amazing? Did you know that? So I said to this guy, I said, sir, I pay taxes, I pay Social Security, I have paid so much taxes I should be a Republican that pays taxes. And I actually own a business, but no sir, I cannot vote. Even though I've covered a presidential campaign, and even though I lived in this country for the past 21 years. And when I sent him the reply, I was reminded by my favorite hate mails, and this is probably my favorite one. This came to me around Christmas last year. It started with Senor Vargas. Gather your things and pack them in a suitcase and get the hell out of America. The U.S. Constitution is for Americans, so it's all caps. She's yelling at me. It's American citizens, not Mexicans, I'm Filipino, El Salvadorians and Guatemalans. I have followed your anti-American bigotry for quite some time now, along with your homosexual, I'm also gay, bullshit that you spit thinking anyone would feel pity for someone else's issues. A lot of Americans, great Americans, have died fighting against enemies to protect the citizens of this country. You are an enemy of the United States of America. Do me a favor and don't speak about America or the U.S. Constitution because you're not American and it's not yours. It's mine. And my fellow brethren. Not some scumbag who shows up and demands all this shit for my tax money. Fuck you. And I hope you get AIDS quickly, since your rate is 99.9% risk rate. So why am I sharing this with you? I actually looked her up on Facebook and friended her. She hasn't responded, she hasn't accepted it. From the look on her Facebook, she's maybe in her 30s. She seemed like a really pleasant woman. I'm not saying that's a joke, she seemed like a pleasant woman, and because on Facebook how people check what they like. So she and I like The West Wing together. She likes The West Wing, so that's good. But I care less about what she wrote, which clearly came with a lot of thought. Never mind the run-on sentences, a lot is 2 words, not one. Forget all that stuff. But I want to understand why she feels and thinks the way she does. Why? How did she get to this point? Is it really even about me? Like, what is it about? So, and really, the question here is, what is immigration really about? And to me, the subject line was really interesting. That was the subject line of the email. Get out of my country. Her first name is Karen. I'm not going anywhere. This is my country. And we're here. And you can't kick us out. And it gets me this question of, when we talk about immigration, and I've done maybe 350 events in 44 states all across the country, Wisconsin, Iowa, Ohio, Nebraska, a whole month in Alabama, mostly Tuscaloosa, Birmingham. Are we even on the same page? Like, what is immigration really about, right?
We need to solve this problem.
Illegal immigration.
Illegal immigration.
Come from Mexico.
Angel Island immigrants, national security,
It's a human rights issue. Comprehensive immigration reform verifies how Democrats think immigration doesn't pass. They can get the politics of this.
Immigration is complicated.
Hi, I'm Julian.
My name is David. I'm from Chicago, but I was...
Born in Lagos, Nigeria.
How have you been?
We just wanted to make this video so we can share our story.
I needed to add my voice to it. I'm American. I'm undocumented.
Growing up, having a friend, a loved one, a family.
You know what I find really interesting about that is, you know how they say that like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram is nothing but like a narcissistic cesspool of self-importance? If you're undocumented, using Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter is actually a way to insist on telling people who you are, and that you're not this illegal criminal person that society and the media and our politicians say that we are. When you go home tonight, I'm sure you're going to go home and you're going to go to defineamerican.com, and then I'm sure you're going to go on YouTube and you'll put undocumented on the search box. You're going to find all of these people who are just waiting, basically, to be seen. So immigration is story. So I'll give you a very abbreviated version of my story. You saw that in the trailer for the film. So I came in when I was 12 from the Philippines. In the Philippines, I learned to speak English by listening to Whitney Houston and Michael Jackson songs. I didn't know they were black until I got here. We didn't call Whitney Houston or Julia Roberts black or white. We just called them American. It wasn't until I got here that I realized that there's this thing called black or white. And then if you're like me and you look Asian and your name's like Jose Antonio Vargas, where do you fit into this black or white dynamic? I remember one of my earliest memories was singing the national anthem in 6th grade. And I thought it said, "Oh, Jose, can you sing?" I was like, oh my God, I just got here. They're so friendly, you know? And my friend, I had this, my first friend, the first guy that kind of said hi to me is this really tall dude, I guess who's quote unquote black. I didn't know what that meant, but he had orange pants. His name was Shaman Curl. And I remember once he saw me sing the national anthem, and I guess he saw that I was always smiling, you know? And then he said, "Yo, Jose," like, we're not talking about you. So he was the one that said it's Jose, not oh Jose. So this was in 6th grade, I was 12. 4 years later, like any 16-year-old, I went to the DMV to get a driver's permit. And I didn't tell my grandparents. My mother sent me here to live with my parents, her parents, my grandparents, and both of whom are American citizens. My grandpa was a security guard. My grandmother was a food server. My grandfather was actually a member of the NRA until he died. And he was a big Frank Sinatra fan. I didn't tell them that I was going to go to the DMV. I just went. I was listening to Alanis Morissette and Boyz II Men in my Walkman. And when I went to the booth, you know, to give the woman at the booth my green card and my passport as ID, the woman at the booth flipped the green card twice, and she said, "This is fake." And then she said, don't come back here. My first instinct was she was lying. That was my first instinct was, okay, you're lying. My second instinct was, I am not Mexican. Because when you're growing up in California in the mid-1990s, whenever you heard illegal or fake or anything, they always said Mexican. And I'm like, I'm Filipino, yo. Like, I'm not Mexican. Right? Spanish colonialism, all that stuff. But I didn't say anything to her. I just rode my bike, I got home, and my grandfather worked the graveyard shift, so he was always home in the afternoon. So he saw me, and I'm like, I was holding the green card, and he was like, what are you doing with that? And then he said, you're not supposed to be here. That's how I found out. This was in April 1997. There was no Google. There was no internet. We certainly didn't have a computer at home. There were no books. I lived in a pretty typical lower middle class immigrant household. And that was the first time I found out that they had basically smuggled me here. And that green card was paid for by my grandfather for $4,500. I don't think my grandfather made more than $8 his whole life. So he saved up enough money to, save $4,500 to smuggle me here. And in the Philippines, we're like the Italians of Asia. We have huge families. So everybody's an uncle. So I guess the uncle that was on the plane with me was actually the smuggler that they paid to get me here. I didn't know that. And then I guess my grandfather thought I would work under the table jobs, right? Like, and then I marry a woman, and then I get a green card. That was the plan. But then I told my grandfather that I was also gay. And then that got, shit got really complicated. And I just couldn't really, I couldn't really lie about two things at once. And I couldn't be in the closet about two things at once. So in class, during the first period of US history class, my teacher showed the Harvey Milk documentary, The Life and Times of Harvey Milk. I didn't know who Harvey Milk was. But Harvey Milk said at the end of the movie that if a bullet should enter my brain, let it destroy every closet door. And I was sitting in the back of the class, and I raised my hand, and Mr. Farrell called on me, and I was like, blah, 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 I'm gay. Told the entire class, and then ran out. Then the bell rang, and then my girlfriend, Patricia, found out at the brunch. It's not really funny, but so at least I got out of one closet. But thankfully for me, I discovered this thing called journalism. I didn't know what journalism was. Mrs. Dewar said I asked too many annoying questions and I should do this thing called journalism. But what I found out is when you're a journalist, you get this thing called a byline, which means that the article would be the headline and then it says by Jose Antonio Vargas. Byline, right? By Jose Antonio Vargas. So, if I am here illegally without documentation, because I don't have the right papers, what if I'm on the paper? Like, doesn't that mean I exist because I'm on a piece of paper? So I thought, hey, why don't you just keep writing? So writing. I thought maybe I was 17 when I found this out that I could be a journalist and I could be on the paper. So then I thought, I made a list when I was 18 and I said, okay, so maybe I should write for a big newspaper like the Washington Post. I should win a prize, like a big journalistic prize, whatever that may be. I should try to be a political reporter because people think that's like a sexy thing, to be a political reporter. And then I should get published in this thing called The New Yorker because people think that's impressive. So then when I got to be 30, I was about to be 30, I got published in The New Yorker, profiling Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg decided that I was the only person he was going to talk to before that Facebook movie came out, The Social Network. And Mark is actually a pretty friendly guy. I spent 5 days with him. The third day, we were walking around his office, and then I'm asking him all these uncomfortable questions about what do you really want from us? Did you steal this idea from the Winklevi, the twins? What do you really think about privacy? What do you really have to hide? Maybe that's why you don't care about privacy. And then Mark turned around, and at one point asked me, hey Jose, where are you from? Very kind of simple question. Where are you from? The simple answer was, I'm from Mountain View, which is right next door to Palo Alto. But my eyebrows did what they do, which is, I'm sure, just kind of like that. Because I was kind of done. At that point, everything I ever wanted materially, I got. I had the writing assignment from the New Yorker. I had a great apartment in New York. I could afford everything I wanted. But where I was from was I was always lying about a big part of who I am and how I got here, while I work as a journalist, which is supposed to be about telling the truth, while lying about who I am. Where I'm from is in 2010, while I was writing this Mark Zuckerberg profile, I read about these 4 kids from Miami who were undocumented, who decided that they were going to walk from Miami to Washington, D.C. One of them, Isabel, actually, on the glasses, he goes to school here, right? He's a research assistant for Elizabeth over there. So they decided that they were going to walk all the way from Miami to Washington, D.C. to advocate for this thing called the DREAM Act. Now, the DREAM Act was introduced in 2001, a year after I graduated from high school. I wanted nothing to do with it. I wanted to be quiet, to be careful, to not say anything, to work hard, and just shut the hell up. Because when you're undocumented, you're supposed to be quiet. You're not supposed to walk with cameras chasing you and then put them on YouTube. So I remember watching YouTube videos of these 4 young people, including Gabby Pacheco, who's one of my dearest friends now. And watching the videos of them, I felt like a real coward. So I decided that I was going to face up to this. That's my mom. Where I am from, is I left her, she put me on a plane when I was 12, and I haven't seen her since. I can't leave, because if I leave, I won't be able to come back. There's no guarantee. And she's been denied a tourist visa 3 times, because she's not wealthy enough, and she doesn't own property. Because if you're from what they call a third world country, you can't even come here on a tourist visa. And she's on a 16-year waiting list to come. So that's where I'm from. And I decided after all of this, I'm done. No more lying, no more hiding, no more being a coward. And I was practicing what I call a radical form of transparency. And against the advice of 27 lawyers, isn't that the most horrible photo you've ever seen? In a 4,000-word essay, I call it more of a confessional, I admitted to everything. I admitted to using fake social security numbers. I admitted to lying in government forms to get jobs. I admitted to filling out a form and declaring that I'm a U.S. citizen, although I'm not, because that was the only way that I could get a job. It was either I get the job, I pay taxes, I work, or I don't do anything. So I admitted to all of it, and then I waited, because I thought maybe, the government was going to call. I thought someone was going to knock on my apartment, so I saved enough money. I saved up enough money. I told my grandmother where all the money is. I packed. I kind of put some stuff in storage. I prepared. I get on Colbert, I do Bill O'Reilly, I do all of these things, and then nothing happens. Mind you, that same year, President Obama has deported about 400,000 people. And 2/3 of that deportation are actually people who are committing quote-unquote minor infractions. Somebody right now, probably a lot of people as we're sitting here, somebody's driving on your freeway without a license, they're getting pulled over, they don't have a license, they get detained, and before you know it, they're deported. 1,000 people get deported every day. Just not me. So I'm waiting, nothing happens, and so I called the editor of Time magazine and I said, hey, I want to write a story about why they haven't deported me. He was like, what? If we're going to do this, let's do it all the way, right? So then I called immigration myself, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. I called them and I'm like, hi, I'm Jose Vargas. I'm writing a story for Time magazine. I haven't heard from you. Are you going to deport me? Why? Why not? The woman on the line was very confused. And then she kind of figured out who I was, and then she put me on hold. Then she gets back on the line, and then she says, what are you doing? I'm like, what are you doing? And then I'm like, yo, I'm on deadline. I'm on deadline, the piece is due, I need a comment. And she says, we can't comment. No comment. And I actually think that's a metaphor for how most of America thinks of us. Right? You all know we're here. We're in Florida. You know, your economy is dependent on us. You know, we drive on the same freeway, we go to the same, Publix? We go to the same schools, we shop at the same stores, we live in the same neighborhoods. No comment. So long as somebody is mowing your lawn and babysitting your kid and, you know, picking your tomatoes for your salad, you're cool. You're good. Right? I mean, at least to me, that's how it seems to me. So I read this essay for Time magazine, and then the photo editor was like, hey, we're going to put you on the cover. I'm like, no, I already did that. It was horrible. And so I said, hey, why don't we like put 34 people on the cover? And we had 4 days. And he was like, you're not going to pull this off. So my next phone call was Gabby Pacheco, who walked from DC, from Miami to DC. And I said to Gabby, we need to get 30 people to New York City to get on a photo shoot for the cover of Time magazine. I have to say, by the way, this is like one of the proudest moments in my life. So 34 undocumented young people from 15 different countries, as you saw in the trailer, representing the full scope of the undocumented population in this country. And the whole time that I've been doing this, I've also, as you saw in the trailer, made a film. I employed about 30 people in making that film. The film is on iTunes and Netflix if you want to check it out. And for me, the goal of the film is to insist on the humanity of this issue. And I've talked to you about this poster. This is the poster for the film. That's the green card that I hated. When I was a kid, I hated that green card. I hated it. I hated that it was fake. I hated that it was a lie. I hated that it cost $4,500. I thought that maybe it cost more than that. I didn't understand why $4,500. I hated that my grandparents didn't really think it through. You know, they like, get him here, you know, marry him off, and then we're fine. I just hated everything it represented. And then you get older, and you mature, and then you feel really bad because you realize what your parents and what your grandparents have done for you, and the sacrifice that they made so that you can be. And then I started being proud of something that I was very embarrassed and resentful about. So in honor of my grandfather, who unfortunately died 5 years ago, this lie is at the heart of the poster. I'm going to show you a clip from the film, from your neighboring Alabama. Wait up, is it a neighbor?
Yeah.
It is, right?
Yes.
It's one scene from the film.
A new illegal immigration law that's said to be the toughest in the nation is on the books in Alabama.
The law will allow officials to check the immigration status of students in public schools and give the police new powers to determine whether someone is in the country illegally.
But it goes beyond the legal issue. In part, what happens next to the 4% Latinos in Alabama and to the rest of Alabama's immigrants depends on whether or not this starts being treated in Alabama as not just a demographics issue, but as a civil rights issue.
So can you tell me a little bit about how this has impacted you personally? Like, do you know people who are undocumented?
I do know some people who are undocumented, and I know people who are documented, and it created a level of fear for them. Where, you know, Thomas Jefferson said, you should never fear your government, the government should fear you, where this produces...
Just straight up, dude. I mean, hearing you all.
Yeah.
This sound like garbage.
So you agree with it? So you agree with it? So you agree with the immigration law?
Yes, I do. Get the motherfuckers up out of here. That's what I agree with. Yes. Bye-bye. Get your papers or get out. That's what I agree with. That's what I agree. You got your papers?
What was that?
You got your papers?
What if I told you it didn't?
Well, then you need to get your ass home then. That's what I say.
Okay.
That would be my response.
Yeah.
No, we're not going nowhere. I'm chilling. You shut up.
Quit being a shit ass.
Shut your face.
Don't embarrass me.
So you took the steps necessary to become a United States.
There's no steps.
There is a couple steps.
Wait, what? There's no steps, man. My mom wanted to give me a better life. I was 12. So she sent me to live with her parents in California.
Alright.
So I guess...
You live with them?
Yeah, I lived with them. Then I found out I was illegal. And then I'm like, shit, I better speak English well, or else they're going to think I'm illegal. I'm going to work my ass off. Work at the Washington.
So
I've been making my taxes since I was 8. 18. Been paying my taxes since I was 18.
Good.
That's good, man.
That's great.
Thank you.
The thing is, though, you gotta, you came over here and you became a productive member of society, right? That's what you did, right?
Everybody wants to be, right? Everybody wants to be.
Everybody does, everybody does.
Yeah.
But when you got hordes of people coming over here and they're staying 10 deep in their fucking apartment and they're lowing down, like, you know, I'm a contractor. I'm a blue collar guy.
Smart baby.
I build houses, you know what I'm saying? When you got somebody that put a roof on a house for $10, you got another one that's gotta do it for about $20 or $30.
I own 32 acres here.
And are you born and raised here in Alabama?
Yes, born here and raised in Alabama. I don't farm on the scale that I did at one time for the simple reason that I'm getting older. Paco is the nickname of my Latino worker, and it's a friendship, and he works with me also. I'd rather say he works with me than for me. If I go to Paco's house, his 3 children come hug me just like my grandkids come hug me. That's one of his little son. The youngest one, but I've accidentally erased the other. But Latinos are scared. If they're here illegally, they're scared. If they're here legally, they've got family members that they're scared for. But the idea that if I've got Paco in a vehicle with me, then I'm liable also, and I can be arrested. Well, that's telling me who my friend, the state of Alabama, telling me who my friends can be. I'm a conservative and I'm a hardcore Republican, but I don't agree with them on this. I think you've got an immigration problem, but this is no way of solving it.
There's a lot in that 4.5-minute scene. So let me unpack both things that happened. Lawrence. I met Lawrence while I was trying to figure out how to film in Alabama. By the way, how many times have you heard of stories like Lawrence? Do you hear that kind of story of a farmer or a coworker or employer who actually is working with somebody who's undocumented? I knew that I had the right guy when he said, I work with him, he works with me, not for me. Right? And what's interesting about Lawrence is he grew up during the Bull Connor years in Alabama. And he said back then, he used the word coward shit. He said he didn't say anything. When all of that was happening, and Jim Crow and race and racism was dividing Alabama, as it still does, he didn't say anything. Because he thought it had nothing to do with it. He's not black. And then he said when this happened, he couldn't stay silent like he did last time. And you know, Lawrence has really risked a lot by being in this film, by advocating for Paco, especially in this community. It's been really, really interesting. We're actually going to do a screening of the film in Coleman, Alabama, with farmers. That's going to be interesting. The first scene with the drunken guy, we never got his name. That was interesting in many ways, but I was really troubled by the way he was talking to his girlfriend, wife, fiance, we didn't know. I was going to take that out, but then I'm like, that's part of the context, right? And I couldn't take it out. I actually would argue that all of us 11 million undocumented people in this country, I actually think we show Americans what it is to be an American. That it's a fight. That it's not something that just like lands in your lap and you get because you happen to be born here. That you actually have to earn it. You have to work for it. I actually think that's what we're showing Americans. As I said, I get a lot of emails, and one of the emails I got recently, maybe 3 months ago, was from a guy named Armando. He wrote me an email and he said, hello, Jose, I've been here for 25 years, and I really want to know more of my country. I want to visit New York, Las Vegas, Orlando, Hollywood, but I'm afraid to go to the airport because I don't have documents. I follow you on Twitter and always wondered, how do you do it? I hope one day we can fix our situation and I can know my country. I was so touched with his email that I emailed him right away and asked for his phone number. I talked to him. He's in Oklahoma. He's 47 years old. He has never left Oklahoma, never set foot on a plane. He has been working since he was 25. He actually owns an apartment in Oklahoma City. But he started like internet chatting with this girl in Las Vegas, this woman, and he wants to go meet with her in Vegas. So when I called him, he was like, hey, can I like take the plane, you think? Like, do you think it's safe? And, you know, I'm listening to him on the phone, and I'm like, dude, like, you know, when you're ready to go, I'll go with you. I'll go with you with your Mexican passport. We'll go to the airplane and see what happens, right? Just so you can see this woman, because apparently they're like getting closer and closer, you know, on Facebook. And you know what the subject line was of this email? Flying. Is there anything more natural than moving? Is there anything more American than driving? People move. People move. So, I'm in Florida. God bless Florida. God bless Marco Rubio, one of your senators, on his book, which I read, called An American Son. Marco Rubio, a presidential candidate, quote, said, many people who came here illegally are doing exactly what we would do if we lived in a country where we couldn't feed our families. If my kids went to sleep hungry every night and my country didn't give me an opportunity to feed them, there isn't a law, no matter how restrictive, that would prevent me from coming here. I read that thing and I underlined it because I want to make sure that we remind Marco Rubio of this exact quote from his own book whenever he utters a word on immigration. And then, you know, when I read it, I kept thinking, has humanity ever built a border that could withstand human will? So long as people are hungry, they're going to cross whatever border you put in front of them. How many billions of dollars have we spent on border security? I would rather, by the way, we spend the billions of dollars to send you all to college, because, you know, college is really expensive. And since I am in Florida, perpetually a swing state, thankfully, you guys recently passed tuition equity so that undocumented students here. But what about driver's licenses? Washington, nothing is going to happen. I think the election from 2 nights ago said that we're in for a political crawl here. But while that's happening in DC, why can't we provide undocumented Floridians driver's licenses? 11 states have done it. Washington State, New Mexico, Utah has done it. If Utah can do it, Florida can do it. So how do we hold our elected officials like Marco Rubio and your governor to this? And since I am speaking at this university, every single civil rights movement in this country has been led and grounded by young people. Unless young people get involved, the kind of energy, the kind of commitment, the kind of optimism that this country has always been about, that's what feeds us. So how many people here think undocumented Floridians should be given driver's licenses? Can you all talk amongst yourselves? And here's the thing. The Latino community will continue to organize and mobilize. The Asian community is learning to be better. But unless white people and black people get involved, nothing is going to change. One last thing before we start taking questions. The most tragic thing for me that has happened in the past 3 years when I travel is when I hear people use the word illegal and Mexican interchangeably. And once people find out that I'm not Mexican, they feel free to hate on Mexicans in front of me. As if there's something wrong with being Mexican. As if all of Latin America is Mexico. As if all undocumented people are from Mexico. So we're about to have Thanksgiving. the most uncomfortable time of the year. And I have a request. So when you hear your relatives, your friends, your coworkers use the word illegal to refer to somebody, can you, like, I don't know, call them out? Like, I am here, let's not be politically correct, I am here illegally, right? I have no authorization to be here, according to our government. But I, as a person, am not illegal. It's a pretty kind of interesting, simple distinction, right? Can you think of any other instance in the American vernacular in which you refer to a group of people as illegal? Think about it. You don't call them illegal drunk drivers. You call them drunk drivers. This is the only issue. And how do you legalize people who are illegal? You don't. You call them illegal, end of conversation. So if that's what for us as Divine American, we cannot change the politics of this issue unless we change the culture in which people talk about this issue. Can you imagine where LGBT rights would be without Ellen DeGeneres, without Will and Grace, without Modern Family? And that for every will, there's a grace. There's the straight best friend, the straight coworker, the straight ally that advocates for that person. So we need allies. Martin Luther King said that history will record that in this period of great transition, the greatest tragedy is not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people. Your silence is no longer acceptable. It's either you're a part of the problem or you're a part of the solution. So we really need you. Thank you for having me. I remember I saw a video in the library, and I borrowed the video of James Baldwin. It was a documentary. And he looked into the camera, just live television, with a guy named Kenneth Clark, it's like some TV broadcaster. And James Baldwin looks into the camera, and James Baldwin was black and gay at a time in which America was wrestling with the black part and didn't know what to do with the gay part, right? And Baldwin looks into the camera and says, "This is a marriage, Una." Then he says, "I am not the N-word. You, white America, created the N-word. So now you have to ask yourself, why did you find the need to create that word? But you created it, so therefore you need it. But I'm not that word." You know, when you're growing up, and you're like an illegal faggot, so you're thinking, okay, why do they use those words to call me? And then I had to realize that what you say about me and what you decide to call me actually says a lot more about you than you can possibly ever say about me. So I think, and this is where Baldwin for me was so, you know, his insistence that when you discriminate against somebody, you are actually also suffering. There's something fundamentally wrong with that cop beating that black woman for being in a rally. There's a moral corruption. There is a moral corruption that happens when 6-year-old kids come walking, and then we call them illegal, and then we want to send them back. To what? They didn't come here so they can go to Disneyland. So for me, he was really kind of instrumental. I really don't know how I would have, it framed the way I thought about America and the way I thought about myself pretty early on. And then journalism, I think, kind of deepened that in the way that I have to, you have everybody in you. You know, you have everybody in you. So I feel like empathizing with that is like really important.
So what I hear when you describe that is just tremendous fear. I mean, it's just Americans are so afraid right now, and I'm just wondering, you know, what is the energy behind that fear? Where is that fear coming from? And how can we help people? I mean, what we hear when we talk about this topic, even on campus, is very quickly people get afraid and they shut down, and then they usually say, "We are a nation of laws." Yes. Like they really want the foundational comfort of saying, you know what, this is too fuzzy for me.
This is too gray.
Yeah, this is too
So
gray.
when they say the nation of laws, all I think about was Jim Crow. All I think about is Loving versus Virginia. All I think about is when gay people were considered immoral and inhumane, and and when sodomy was against the law. All I think about is when I first read the Constitution when I was in 6th grade, and it said all men are created equal with unalienable rights, and then a few pages later I see that they said that black people were 3/5 of a man. That's all I hear. So yes, we are a nation of laws, but justice doesn't always equal law.
And laws evolve.
And laws evolve. So that's what I think. But also I want to understand though, but to me that's inherent people thinking, like, I don't enjoy being documented. This is not fun. Right? Because people ask me questions online where there's a scene where people are like, why don't you make yourself legal? Because I'm a masochist, and this is like so much more fun. Right? And then you explain to them there's no line. If there was a line, I'd be behind the line with Beyonce albums, chilling out and waiting. But the line doesn't exist. How many times does politicians say that? Wait in line, wait in line, wait in line. There's no line. So I think I understand, again, the empathy. I understand where that comes from, but I think this is where my biggest fear for us, we were talking about fear. Back in the 50s and 60s, I've been studying what really helped propel the civil rights movement. And one of it was the media. There's a book called The Race Beat, won the Pulitzer in 2007 for history. It was a book that said what happened when white journalists from the North came to the South and called it what it was. Back then, people read newspapers, and there were 4 news channels. So however racist you may be, or whatever you think, we had the exact same information. Now we don't. I just read you those statistics about taxes and Social Security. Did you ever hear about those figures? No, because we're a bunch of illegal criminals who are crowding your emergency rooms in your schools, who are speaking Spanish at your Walmart, who's taking away your apple pie and replacing it with tacos. Like, that's what we're doing. That's the master narrative. So this is why I feel like we cannot change the politics of this issue until we change the conversation and we change the language. So long as people call us a bunch of illegals, every presidential candidate and senator that wants to win office are going to say border security. Right? The media is a really big part of this. And, you know, the fact that we live in filter bubbles.
Right, right. It's hugely different. I'm old enough to remember that too. And it seems like that's why YouTube and social media are going to be, are so important.
Yes.
Because they're the only place where people can actually see things more broadly. I mean, do you remember, well, you're not old enough, I don't think, to remember when the Vietnam War was happening, the visuals on the news of people being blown apart and killed had a tremendous effect on people. But if you think about the last few wars we've been involved in, you don't see any of it. You don't see any of it. So it's to your point that if you can avoid seeing reality, then you can hold on to reality.
I was recently watching Lincoln. I'd never seen the movie Lincoln, the Spielberg film. It was really hard to watch because I had to keep reminding myself who the Democrats were and who the Republicans were. Right? Because it was like, it was like really opposite. I was like, wait, what happened?
Yeah.
And then it made me really think, we have to get the politics out of this issue, or else people are going to think, oh, you can't do that because Latinos will vote Democrat, or you'll do that. This has to be beyond politics. But right now, that's where it's in. It's stuck in this political U.S.-Mexico border box.
Right, right. Well, and as so many issues.
As there are so many issues.
As education is, as healthcare is. So let me ask you this question. One of the questions we got is, looking around the world, are there countries that handle immigration and this issue differently or better than the United States?
Canada and Australia.
They do.
Those are 2 countries. Actually, in Canada, I was wondering if I wanted to move there. Thought about it. Not all of them. They were just like, hey, if you want to start a business here, I love Anna Green Gables. I was English, but Anna Green Gables. And Celine Dion is great. I could do without Justin Bieber. Sorry. Those two countries I think have figured out the balance between if we want, because now in this country you have people who graduate college here, who got educated here, that decide to leave because our system is so antiquated. Right? We have a really backwards, we're basically running an analog immigration system in a digital world, is what we're running. And it's it's so not only unfair and really, I don't want to use the word morality here, but that's what this is about. Like, it just doesn't fit a 21st century American model, right? And by the way, one thing that we haven't even spoken about is the root causes of migration. So this summer to me was really infuriating because we could have started asking questions like, why are the kids coming here? What did we do to El Salvador, to Guatemala, and to Honduras? Like, again, like I don't want to get into this thing about beating America up. That's not what this is about. This is about basing our history on what we do, right? So we haven't even really asked the hard questions of what does foreign policy and U.S. trade agreements have to do with migration patterns, which really are at the heart of this question. But we're too busy calling people illegals, and that we don't. I have to tell you, I hate to say this, but this is true. You cannot refute it. If those kids were coming here from Canada, if those kids were white, whatever white is, we would not have sent them back. I was reading yesterday about a 3-year-old boy who had to appear in front of an immigration judge by himself with no lawyer. There are 77,000 young people that have to appear in front of an immigration judge, because to be in this country illegally is a civil offense, not a criminal one. That's why calling us illegal is actually ironically factually incorrect. But these kids have to go in front of a judge. And the President Obama, our president, has deported 2 million people in 6 years, more than any other president. And President Obama has decided that he was going to give the kids lawyers, but then he was also going to deport them, all at the same time, which is very confusing for lawyers. But can you imagine these kids in front of an immigration judge? And I keep thinking about the Irish potato famine, you know? Kids and families getting on boats to come here, would we have turned them away?
You know, you mentioned the president, and you know, this is such a, I noticed after this midterm election, there was just so much conversation about that. Do you have any insight, since you've been up and around Washington, about
No, I actually covered the president for 2 years.
So why is this president have the attitude he does about immigration? How does that, and deportation? It seems so, I don't know.
Well, I think one thing we have to really acknowledge is I don't think any other president has faced the kind of vitriol. What happened the moment he got elected president? Mitch McConnell, now the Senate Majority Leader, said, we're going to make him a one-term president. And again, this is not all about race, but you cannot, and having traveled the way that I have, you cannot separate that from this. Now, however, I don't think our president can fully justify and explain the deportation of 2 million people, more than 2 million people. And the fact that I know people know this, every day it's congressionally mandated that 35,000 beds are filled all across America in detention centers. Did you all know that? There's a 35,000 bed quota that started under President Bush, that continued under President Obama, that said that on any given day, at least 35,000 immigrants must be in jail. So by the way, do you know that your tax money is paying for your jail? And then do you know who's benefiting from this? For-profit corporate prisons. Again, is this something that the Miami Herald writes about? I don't know. But, so I don't think the president can fully explain why this happened, but I think also the otherness of this. I don't know if you've noticed this, the president doesn't really talk about a lot his own kind of immigration background from his dad. His uncle, his aunt, one of them actually got deported, one of them was arrested. Because I think the president, what happened the moment we elected him president? The birther movement started. So if our own democratically elected president's citizenship was being questioned by Donald Rumsfeld in his toupee, what luck do I have? So I think the president has just been really unwilling to touch the issue. And to me, the lost opportunity here is how do you connect Ferguson? How do you connect the criminalization of black people in this country, particularly black men, and the criminalization of immigrants in this country? And I think we are missing that moment.
Well, I hope we don't miss it.
I don't know, sir. I mean, you're in Florida. I'm so sorry. Because, the election started, the presidential started today. Can you imagine the amount of ads you're going to get? They're all going to come here. They love Florida. Great. But, are we going to let them get away with all their talking points? I don't know. It's going to be a tough election. Because, for me, Iowa, I spent a month in Iowa, and I called it the Oprah effect. I completely am sure that President Obama would not have won the Iowa caucuses without Oprah. There are enough people in Iowa that subscribe to Oprah magazine that far supersedes the amount of votes the president won the Iowa caucuses in. And you know what I discovered when I was there? People are like, I'm not racist, I like Oprah. I'm not racist, I'm going to vote for the black guy. And then they voted for the black guy, and then they're saying, oh, it's even worse now. So can you imagine what's going to happen after this? I don't think we're going to see another person of color as president for a while.
What do you think are the likelihood of any further immigration reform over the next few years?
Well, I, for one, speaking for myself, am unwilling to support any sort of immigration reform that further criminalizes the border. I think we've spent enough time talking about this border and spending money on it that I think right now I'm not sure that a quote-unquote comprehensive immigration reform bill is possible. I would rather us figure out what things can we do now. The president issuing an executive action to stop needless deportations of people. There's 5,000 kids right now in foster care who are American citizens because both of their parents have gotten deported. Okay? All the 2/3 of the deportations are because people are committing minor infractions like driver's licenses. This is why the driver's license issue is so important. So instead of talking about comprehensive immigration reform, why can't we figure out what we can do state by state by state? So I think that's what we're doing.
So maybe we can wrap up with you giving some advice. You sort of ended your talk by talking about how you need, especially the young people in the audience, to sort of get involved. What are some of the things that people can do to help us with this situation? Because it's a challenge.
I mean, Florida is a hotbed of immigrant activism. There's a lot of groups, DreamAct groups. Flick is a wonderful organization. If you don't know what they are, please look them up. There's that, but I think there's one thing that I think is even more, that I just want to have a real conversation here. So how many people here are American citizens? Can you raise your hand? Can you not take it for granted? And can you remember that people are actually fighting for something that you have? Someone the other day asked me, because I've been running like crazy and I really need to kind of take a break. But this journalist was asking me, why am I doing this? And why am I doing it kind of at this rate of I'm in 14 cities in 20 days. Because I feel like I'm making up for all the lost time. I should have done this a long time ago. I feel like my life started 3 years ago. And then I'm doing it because I feel like you find purpose when you find gratitude. I'm grateful for my grandfather for the $4,500 plus fake green card. I'm grateful for my high school principal who found me a scholarship so I could go to college. I am grateful for an editor at the Washington Post who, when I told him, because getting hired at the Washington Post as undocumented was a whole other issue. So 4 months after I got hired, I took Peter Pearl, this editor, for a walk, and I told him everything. And I thought he was going to say, okay, we'll turn you in now. You know what he said? He said, you make so much more sense now. He was like, you're always nervous. Second thing, don't tell anybody else. Just keep going. His name is Peter Pearl. He's what we call a mensch. He's not Jewish, but he's a mensch. And he's Jewish. And when we talk about this issue, there are many other Peter Pearls all across the country that we haven't heard from. There's actually a risk for people like us to come out because we can get arrested and deported. What's the risk for you? So that's why silence is no longer acceptable, and that's why we need you to get involved. And that starts in your own home, in your own communities, within your own friends, in your family, your loved ones. I've been uncomfortable since I was 16. As far as I'm concerned, I'm just writing the uncomfortable. So thank you so much again for having me here.
Thank you.
And good luck